While we check we're online, can everyone make sure they're logged in, please? Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank those who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. A reminder, everyone, just to click join meeting in board view. Now, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songline traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Jaibil and Jarawar peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present, emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First People. I'd like to note an apology from Councillor Carol Taylor today, and a motion that the apology for non-attendance for Councillor Carol be accepted. Moved by Councillor Rebecca, seconded by Councillor Jeff. All those in favour? Carried. I'd also like to note the leave of absence for Councillor Melissa Taylor, however no resolution is required. Now, do we have any declaration of prescribed conflicts of interest or declarations of declarable conflicts of interest to declare, please? No? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so today we have the Regional Development Statistics Report. So I shall hand over to Dr. Nicola Stepanov to go through that.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, councillors. Just in summary, for the August figures, so that's what we're discussing today, the development applications received are higher than the monthly average and also higher for July. The development applications approved for August were higher than the monthly average but lower than July. Building applications approved is lower in August than it was for July. However, if you have a look at graph 4, I just want to draw your attention to the high number of lots that were sealed and released onto the market, which is quite extraordinary. So we've had that for 2 months in a row, 2 consecutive highs, and we'd like to keep that going along, which would be we'd be very grateful, as with the community. In terms of the combined value for August, it's sitting at just over 54 million. And that's noting that high of July 2024, and you can see that on graphs 11 and 15, of 93 million is extraordinarily high. So 55 million, or circa 55 million for the month of August, is still a very good amount. And I'm happy to take any questions that councillors might have.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, Dr. Nicola, just an observation, I guess, in regard to page 7. It's page 7. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's the lot in assessment and construction pipeline. Just reflecting on this for a moment and comparing to last month's, I'd just like, if you could, perhaps an explanation. You could take it on notice if you like. Recently approved operational works not being constructed. August is 423. Previous months were 320. So I guess the definition of not being constructed, is that a decision by the applicant, or is it something else that, other external factors that might be at play as to why that they're not being constructed? And maybe it's a question on notice.
Thank you. I'll take that question on notice. It may just be the terminology. Perhaps what it means is not yet being constructed, but I will take that on notice. Oh, actually, Carrie might have some insights. Carrie?
So the reason that this number is higher than last month is there were operational works approved last month, and they have not yet been constructed. So before operational works starts, there's a pre-start meeting that's held on site, and the information is physically updated to reflect the number of lots that have commenced construction, but that cannot occur until that pre-start meeting happens.
Okay, so it is maybe not being constructed. I guess from my mind, I'm looking at a number of reasons that, or factors, but that's the one factor, really. It's the pre-start. So maybe it's operational works are waiting for a pre-start or something like that, rather than not being constructed.
Or waiting for finance, as Carrie said. What we might
could
do
be
is actually look at the
finance, could be.
wording there, just to make sure it's not, that it is as accurate as it can be, because it may well be it's approved, but the pre-start meeting hasn't occurred, which is, and that would be a simpler way to say it.
Yeah, I don't want to overcomplicate it, other than to, if it's a flag for us as a board to know the factors that aren't, that are happening, but obviously the pre-start's the key one. So, and there'd be factors why that wouldn't be happening as well. But the not being constructed seems, it's almost like a line that says they've got approval, but they're not doing anything with it, which is a problem across the southeast, to be honest, at the moment. So maybe it's reflective of that.
Just a few other things to consider too is they also, once they've got their operational works, they tend to go into a tendering process, which, depending on the size of the contract, that tendering process can take several months, 6 months or more, depending, yeah.
Councillor Tim and then Councillor Kerry. Councillor Shine.
No, thanks, Chair. Thanks, General Manager. I note from item 8 that there seems to be an increase in the applications for incentive for dual occupancies and multiple dwellings, and that's would be a pleasing result, bearing in mind the focus towards addressing the housing shortage at the moment, one assumes.
Absolutely, thank you. And also those density targets imposed by Shaping SEQ. So we do want to see more of those dual occies coming through. And Mr. Mayor, I will follow up, because we'll just look at the wording, because if we can do that wording a little bit more precisely, it makes things much easier for you guys.
Councillor Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Nicola. I'm just asking a question about specifically the Princess Street development, and it is an MID, meaning it doesn't come before us, but it is new dwellings approved. So MIDs in general, do they come on this graph for saying new approved dwellings, and has that one specifically as yet come onto this graph?
Thank you very much, Councillor Tim. So they won't be in our numbers because we're not assessing them, but what we are doing is we're going to change the graphing for next month. So it'll have the number of assessments that we've approved, and then we will capture the number of building certifications, because we need to be notified of those, and in that number we'll see whether it's social housing or mids, etc. And that's probably the best way for us to table that knowledge, given that we don't do the assessments for things like mids.
Thank you for that answer. So if we don't have any of the mids or the state government work on these graphs, how often are there more houses being developed or approved than what we read about in these graphs? Is it a regular thing?
Thank you. No, it would only be if there was, say, for example, a mid. I think that for the purposes of this report, this is council business, so it's the activities of P&D, whereas a mid is assessed by the state. I'm not sure if the state releases their numbers. We can go onto the website, but I think the way to capture work that is assessed outside of council and outside of the ability of, or the work of council officers, is if we do something like the add building certification. So with building certification, we have our own company, Total Range, that does building certification, but they're also private certifiers. So in that data, it will not merely be the ones certified by us, because private certifiers also have to send us a copy of any certifications just for, and we keep them on record. That's just part of legislation. So that's probably the best way to capture the data. But we only report against council activities, and that would be why there's that difference.
Thanks, Dr. Nicole. And I note that DA approvals have increased by almost a third. Do you think there's a particular reason for that?
Thank you. Look, I think there's a range of reasons. We're getting really good feedback on the work of our all of the staff in DA, and they're spread across our branches. So we have planning, we've got engineers, we've got environmental officers, architects, landscape, all those types of things. And then also we've got staff within the other networks that do DA as well. So we're hearing really good things. We've changed our processes across P&D branch to be more effective and more efficient. That was a promise that I made at the beginning of my second year here, which is coming to an end. So hopefully we're a good partner to do business with, and we're making sure that will be our reputation moving forward. But it could also be that there's just a lot of development happening at the moment.
Great, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Trevor?
Morning, Dr. Nicola. Have you seen any increase since we put through that TLPI of any increases in activity with developers, what I would call rushing in, maybe, to beat the system?
Thank you. I can get Carrie. So Carrie's team would be the one that sees any applications. And I should say, so the TLPI is not in effect. There's a motion to do a TLPI. So we're working with the state, which is also in caretaker mode, just to look at how that might occur. In the interim, we have received a number of applications, and I think you've got the numbers. So they're pre-lodgements. I'll just hand over to Carrie, Manager Planning.
We have had a number of pre-lodgements. We're having a high number of pre-lodgements generally. There have been 2 or 3 in the last couple of weeks that have involved subdivision that would involve the clearing of vegetation. That could be a coincidence. It also might be a response to the motion. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No. Okay, so I would like to propose a motion that the report of the General Manager Planning and Development Group on the Regional Development Statistics for August 2024 be noted by Council. Moved by Councillor Kerry, seconded by Councillor Tim. All those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. And now I would like to conclude the meeting at 9:15 a.m. Thank you. Now, councillors, I remind you to leave the meeting in board books, please.
Good morning, councillors. Welcome to the Water and Waste Committee meeting for October. We've all left the planning and development meeting, but we also have to join the Water and Waste Committee meeting for October. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. I acknowledge the Mayor, Acting CEO Mr Hauser, and General Manager for Water and Waste Services, Jake Passier. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We do need an apology motion that the apology for non-attendance from Councillor Carol Taylor be accepted. Do I have a mover in the Mayor? Seconded by Councillor Manteifel. All those in favour? It's carried. And we also note the leave of absence that's previously been granted for Councillor Melissa Taylor. There are no items on the agenda today, and so with that, I close the meeting at 9:15. Thank you.
All good. Welcome to the Infrastructure Committee meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I would like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge anyone watching the Council's social media channels. Councillors should click to join the meeting. I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today. The Western Waka Waka, Wakaboo, Gababoo and Jaho peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge-rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. The attendance include an apology for Carol Taylor, that the apology for non-attendance of Carol Taylor be accepted. James O'Shea first and Rebecca second. Leave of absence. I'll vote in favour. It's the third time. Leave of absence, Carol Taylor. Declaration of prescribed interest, nil advised. Declaration of declarable, nil advised. All right, the Toowoomba Regional Safety author, Rod Betts, is he?
Good morning, councillors. And Rod, unfortunately, is ill today, so he's away. So I'll present what we have here today. We've only one report for our Infrastructure Committee today, which is the Toowoomba Region's Road Safety Strategy 2024-28. Councillors, this is our third also road safety strategy that we've put forward through my time here in council, and it's about council's continuing action and support to both state and federal initiatives around road safety, but also with a focus on our local region in particular. Today has been a culmination of a fair bit of work over the last nearly 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, in updating the strategy and looking forward to through 2024 to 28. The strategy is guided by the goal of Vision Zero, with an aspiration to eliminate road deaths and serious injuries. And the action plans behind it are a combination of engineering treatments, speed management, crash investigations, all that sort of support that we get involved with from different perspectives across those couple of years. Over the last few years, councillors, we continue to be involved in many things that are happening across our region from a road safety perspective. We've just had Rural Road Safety Month in Queensland, but also through the year there's Queensland Road Safety Week and the Federal National Road Safety Week that we give support to. There's other initiatives that we give a lot of work and support to, and that's with our partners being QPS, TMR, and in some cases other stakeholders across our region. One of those major ones is the School Traffic Working Group, which works very closely with all the schools across the region in different ways to, over time, see incremental improvements in road safety initiatives, and particularly around our schools. There's other work that we do with our partners, particularly when it comes to speed management, when we do review of speed zones and different other things across the region. The new strategy, councillors, as you've been on the journey with, really sort of focuses in again on what we can achieve, a little bit more than sort of just being aspirational. So again, it's backed up by what our staff can do and what resources we have available, And typically, again, that's supporting a lot of the state and national initiatives that run locally. But again, through the year, supporting through school safety committees and the speed management, looking at reviews and those sorts of areas, different sorts of road safety audits that we get involved with. We went out with a couple of times with consultation, in particular the last time, which gave some feedback on the road safety strategy. A lot of that feedback was fairly particular to or specific to locations, and those locations have been flagged for future review. But in overall general region. So happy to take any questions through your chair.
Any questions, Trevor? Mike, the process of getting speed limits reduced on streets or roads or whatever, how long from if agreement is done or somebody applies to have a speed limit reduced on a street or a road, what's the process and how long can that usually take if it gets through?
The process is probably a 6 to 12 month process. Again, there's a level of resource constraint, but typically there's a formalised review process that the state has in place. So we follow that very closely. It's got to be assessed in regards to its environment, not just if it's just somebody just complaining about speed of traffic in a road. So the environment that the road environment's a very critical part to doing that. It also goes through, we meet a couple of times a year with both TMR and the Queensland Police Service, and we talk through those requests once the speed review's been completed. So yeah, they meet. I think we only meet probably 2 or 3 times a year, depending on what's on the agendas. Yeah.
Any further questions? Jeffrey?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Good morning. Mike, with regard to this particular strategy, I note that in a number of the themes, it talks about technology considerations and trial new technology. Ironically, just as we started this session, I'm sure every councillor got an email from a proponent who does this sorts of works on roads. Quite interesting. So there must be something in that. Someone's listening. I wondered when we do these updates or strategies, whether we have a serious look at the one that's being replaced as a scorecard. I know certainly this one has some KPIs and measurable KPIs, is what you measure what matters type of arrangement, which is great. But I just wonder whether we do an assessment of the previous one and suggest whether we were close, off the mark, or whether we've made adjustments to this new strategy. Is that a process that takes place?
Most definitely. And there was I know we've been on a journey for at least the last 18 months, but as we commenced this journey early last year, we presented through to Council the information session on how things had progressed. And went through sort of the actions and outcomes of what had happened. It was interesting from a couple of points of view that our last strategy went through a lot of those COVID years, and it was interesting right across Australia, both at state and national level, but obviously the sort of subtle changes that COVID brought in through that period to road safety and the number of crashes and different things like that. The unfortunate thing is that it's gone probably one would have thought over time that numbers would drop, but unfortunately across Australia there's just been when it comes to fatalities, there's been actually an increase across the what's happening across our communities. So yeah, we looked at that. We took some of those outcomes were also that we weren't actually achieving a few of the goals that we had in the last plan, in that they were probably ones that were somewhat outside our control. So this plan has actually been one to bring it back in, to be more focused what we as a council and with the resources that we've got available, what we can potentially achieve. So, and a lot of that really is focused on how we support other entities such as Toowoomba, QPS and others in those different initiatives that are taken through the year, but then also looking across our community with matters such as black spots and other school safety and other road safety initiatives that we can get grant funding for.
Thanks. Just to follow up, if I could, through you, Chair. Mike, you also have, and correct me if I'm wrong, other groups, subgroups, such as the schools group that catch up regularly and what have you. Is that a major part of giving feedback into the road safety strategy and how that works, and making sure that, you know, we are working with schools as well, noting that sometimes international standards for safety are really unachievable, but by working together with others, we can achieve a similar outcome, if not, you know, aim for that zero that we're shooting for, but may not be able to reach that international level that you speak about.
Yeah, so we have council has a school traffic working group, which has council, obviously, Toowoomba, QPS, schools representatives from the state, Catholic and independent school systems. So they meet, again, it probably averages about 3 times a year, and with representations from the schools. They are key stakeholders with respect to who we engage with as we develop up the safety plans and things like that. The state also has the schools transport infrastructure program that we've been involved with over the last few years. That's actually managed and run through by the state, but we, through the school traffic working group, it's definitely a conduit to prioritising the issues that are around our region and trying to get some funding towards improvements where we can. So there's that ongoing working relationship with all those parties to get the best outcome, and that feeds into the development of the road safety strategy in itself. So that's probably an ongoing engagement from that perspective.
Just last one from me, Chair, if I could. The Regional Active and RAPTAC, Public Transport Advisory Committee, is there an intention to go out for applications if that hasn't already done?
Most definitely. My understanding is the advisory committees are coming to Council's November round of meetings, committee meetings.
Right.
And from that point, once they're endorsed by Council, through that process, we'll be out straight away.
Thanks, Mike.
Councillor O'Shea.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mike. I think the Mayor raises a lot of really good points around this. I mean, I think this is it's a really important document, and obviously road safety is a really important. You know, it's just it's obviously of critical importance. Obviously, so it's really important to have these strategies. But I think the biggest challenge with it is that road safety is underfunded from a local government, state government, federal government level. So it's trying to get the best that we can here, because obviously when you read this document, I think one of the key principles of it is the health and well-being of our society. So I just had a couple of questions, Mike. I was wondering if you could talk through or explain, because I guess I'm thinking of this of the general public. If you're picking up and reading this and road safety strategy, and if I read that, the health and well-being of our society shouldn't be traded off, etc. So I'll put safety obviously right at the very top. But there is a difference between a safe road and road safety. So meaning, because there's many other factors with it. So this might be a broad sort of question, but what can you explain? What is a safe road? Like, so from not from people driving on it, from structure-wise, what actually is a safe road under what we would deem a safe road?
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor. It's probably a good question in many ways, but because what we have as a road network throughout Australia obviously is a legacy of roads in many cases that have been around for 100 odd years or more and have evolved from that. From a road safety perspective first, 80% plus of incidents and accidents are caused by driver behaviour, and that's, as I say, a lot of actions that we do as humans when we're the inattention, drinking, driving, speeding, all these sorts of things coming into that fatigue and those sorts of things. What's a safe road? A safe road is one that I suppose is where it can be built to the current day standards, meets, has that opportunity for the road user. And when I talk about the road user, it's everybody that uses the road. So it's from the pedestrian, the cyclist, car users, heavy vehicle users, and those that it can be cater for that as well, for all users as best we can. Unfortunately, we tend to only be able to build newer roads to, be it new subdivisions or be it in new, major roadworks. So those current day standards are taken into account at those points of time to make that section of road as safe as reasonably possible. Seeing if that answers your query.
Yeah, no, I understand, and that's what I mean. As I said, there's a big difference between a safe road and road safety, because I said road safety comes a lot into, as I said, is the actual the user. So I mean, but I just mean, this is because this is a public document for people to sort of see and see where we sit with it. The other question I had around this is obviously there's a key part in road safety, and from this particular document around planning. So we've had discussions in recent times about a few different things and legacies that we've talked about, or different roads where development is actually propped up, and then there's obviously an issue with the use of the road, and often the cry from community around that is that it's a safety issue. It's a safety issue. That's why it has to be upgraded. And in many cases, that is exactly correct, and why we're going down the path that we're going to. So will this document, it's probably more a question, I suppose, for us around the table, but in your opinion, will this document feed into when we're talking about a planning scheme around this sort of thing? Because if this document is sort of saying around the planning of roads and different developments and so forth and so on, and a key part to that is around road safety and safe access and all those sorts of things, that then this surely should should sit side by side, hand in glove with what we have through planning and our planning documents to ensure that any sort of future things that happen have an element of this road safety around whatever is developed there.
Yeah. As you said, council strategies in respect to things that when it comes to the planning scheme, they all have an element that can feed into the scheme from a point of view of what council's expectations are in respect to the development of its community and those sorts of things. To one of your first points, we do get through development a lot of pressure points, and some of those come through such things as ministerial infrastructure designations and different things like that around major developments, and there's a few around our city now that have that sort of impact on us. It's more of an influencing document when it probably comes to the planning scheme, but it can be picked up in things such as when operational works and different things like that, ensuring that safety and consideration of all road users in respect to the infrastructure that's going to be provided in and around a development is up to the appropriate standard for what that development is. And I think that's probably, there's a bit of catch up with sometimes the traffic impact assessments that are done for developments, that sometimes they tend to work on a minimalist approach rather than sort of getting the best community safety outcomes. So that's probably the struggle we do have in that space when it comes to various developments that come through.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. I think final thing I'd add to that, and that's what I mean. Like, I mean, it has to, because otherwise it's in conflict with this document, to be honest. And as you said, we're sort of coming from a position of being behind. We can't get further behind with it by adding more of them into the future, because again, as we said, there's financial constraints, etc. But I just think it's really, really important, obviously, that this document and these standards that we have through here, the principles of it, need to feed through a lot of the other things that impact, like road uses that impact well beyond just the road. It's obviously what's developed around the road, and whether it's parks, whether it's housing, whether it's whatever it may be. So it has to be of critical importance that a lot of these principles are embedded and incorporated into what we do from a planning point of view. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mike.
Councillor Shine.
No, thanks, Chair. Just listening to the conversation, reading the report, I recall reading some time ago that the death statistics on the road in the 1950s, 60s were considerably higher than what they are now, notwithstanding the fact that our population has probably increased double or more since then. So measures taken by all levels of government probably have had some success, and we shouldn't be too gloomy about that in terms of better roads, laws like drink driving laws and seatbelt laws and that type of thing. But my question relates to, you mentioned black spot before, and relevant to current discussion, controversy, if you like, with respect to the black spot construction of the traffic lights in Margaret, 2 sets of traffic lights in Margaret Street. Could you, for the benefit of those here and might be watching online, are you able to just tell us a little bit about the black spot system, how it's applied for, if successful, who what groups have a input into the determination of where black spot funding should be allocated, the general principles associated with the implementation of the black spot system. Thank you.
Yeah, in respect to black spots, and we'll cover off on the Margaret Street example later today in the information session, but generally speaking, it's a federal government initiative funded through at the national level. It's run at a state level through the relevant department, in this case Transport and Main Roads. So each year there's an opportunity for a council to flag what it believes to be some, significant issues in regards to its network and from a road safety perspective. Generally speaking, that's most black spot submissions tend to be of reactive nature. So it's you're looking at crash data and statistical, be it fatalities or major hospitalisations and other data of at least the last 5 years. And that information is collated and that goes in. There's in respect to the incidents and accidents, and I'll use a few that we've probably moved away from that example we'll talk about today, but other ones that we've done around the city, we've had a lot of right turn at intersection incidences against at lights and stuff like that. So it can be sometimes as simple of putting in the red turning lights and things for the right-hand turns and restricting that movement when the oncoming green. So those can be some fairly low-cost improvements to intersection safety, but also have a significant benefit cost from a community perspective, because the types of accidents you have, such as those, are generally quite serious, as in fatalities or major hospitalisations. In regards to the Margaret Street one, there's also, we're taking into account the vulnerable users. So in this case, there's been a number of cyclist incidents that have been hit by vehicles at those intersections in the recent past. So taking into account how we can mitigate the risks of that occurring, so that, and also some schools, access and things like that. So that also gets taken to account. The assessment at the state level is based on fully detailed engineering applications, which go into including road safety audits and other information, and also at the end of the bottom, or at the end of the submission, basically, is what's the benefit cost to the community. And so the state, federal are looking at benefit cost of 2 or more when you value what the accidents cost to the community. And as you can see in today's presentation, or today's report, last the cost over the last 5 years in the order of $322 million. So there's, when they take into community costs, it's more than just our small part from an engineering perspective or an asset point of view. It's a flow-on effect to the rest of our community from things such as hospitalisation. So a lot of that goes into the makeup of putting in a black spot application.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, General Manager Mike, is there opportunity for council as a custodian for the road reserve and an active stakeholder in the overall road safety and management of that? Is there an opportunity for us to push back or give some feedback to the state perhaps, or whoever legislates? Because this stuff here is good, but it's the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, in my view, and that's my personal view. It doesn't mean to say we shouldn't do it, but when you observe learner drivers with adult parents on phones and all those sort of habits continually observed in the beginnings of a young person's driving career, learnt habits are can often result in ongoing statistics, and we've spoken about this in workshops that we've had with, I forget the gentleman's name, the professional we had here, who's very well versed and studied in this area. I just wonder if there's an opportunity for us to actually highlight some issues. They may very well be considered as subjective by some, but unless we look at where things originate, and that is at the beginning of a person's driving career, we will always be managing road safety issues. Is there opportunity for us to take an active role? Maybe it's an LGAQ forum motion, maybe it's representations to the state about, and maybe statistics might show that we have high-risk areas in different driving demographic from what I'd suggest is learnt behaviours. With 100 hours driving, that parents are in the passenger seat with their child. I think it's a high risk. That's my opinion. I might be shot at for having it, but I think it's an area that if we're an active stakeholder, let's look at the whole of the cycle here.
Yeah, you'll note through a road safety strategy, there's 5 key areas of focus for our actions, and one is that advocacy and support. So through that, we do engage in different forums. I won't say, well, basically throughout the year. There's not some key ones, but it's really working with our stakeholders, the police and team from our own perspective. As you mentioned, if there's a desire by council to have the LGAQ or another body take a more significant step in the road safety perspective through, be it those behavioural aspects, such as, you know, learner drivers and different things like that. That is one opportunity, and we can support those sorts of aspects if council wishes to see that sort of get pushed through something like a LGAQ conference. There's a few other different forums through the year at a state level in particular that, you know, if councillors again are keen to be engaged with or involved with, that we could probably bring that information forward a little bit more regularly.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just one more thing. Mike, I realise there is a degree of subjectivity around my comments. But I don't make them out of isolated incidents. I had a near miss this morning on the way in with a provisional driver travelling in the wrong lane, and so did a number of other motorists. It's a real risk. No one wants to talk about it. And if we don't talk about it holistically and have a degree of comfort to look at every aspect, then what it becomes is a massive cost shift to local government, who owns most of the road network, to manage these things. So I don't wish to point a single finger, because I always say 3 point back at me. I'm not a perfect motorist. But we need to look at it holistically, and we need to, as a major stakeholder, be brave enough to raise the issues and the risks that are out there that are transferred into trying to design something that is not, in my view, best managed on the front end. There's multiple examples that I'm sure, if we're all honest here as motorists, every day on the road, we've observed behaviours, and it's not the learner driver or the provisional, particularly in the learner driver's fault. It's probably it's the responsibility of the person sitting in beside them. Maybe we look at putting, you know, it's not for me to say, but the driving school takes a more active role rather than 100 hours sitting beside a person who doesn't necessarily have the best driving habits. I don't know. As I said, a degree of subjectivity, but it needs to be a discussion, and an open, honest discussion with all involved, because it's costing us as ratepayers and taxpayers to manage the outcomes.
Councillor Trevor.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Shine's black spot future roads, GM Mike, how many black spot roads or intersections have we got under consideration at the moment? It's part one of my question. And I think he's looking that up. Sorry. Yeah, second part is right-hand red arrows. Sometimes you're sitting on a road and there's no traffic around, and legally you're stopped at a right-hand red arrow, and safely you could go because there's no other traffic around, but legally you have to stop. And the third part of my question is, slow for Sam signs work quite effectively in Brisbane. Have they ever been considered for different parts of Toowoomba or region?
Sam. Yep. Number of black spot submissions each year, we tend to make probably 3 to 5, just depending on the scale of what's involved. We're sort of looking through, they tend to be intersection focused, but generally speaking, however, we do look across our rural regional areas as well. There's probably, from a black spot perspective, particularly in rural areas, it's a little bit more difficult because you've got to get a grouping of incidents or accidents for instance, might be around a bend that needs improvements or something like that, that there's been a number of accidents over a few years. And sometimes you can, as we get the data, crash statistics and stuff like that, we can pick up on some of that. So there tends to be, in the order, as I said, 3 to 5. There's a couple of presentations we've given the council in the last few years. One covers off on the makeup of black spots and what goes between them. The same with the right turn arrow. We've been some work on that, and I'd be happy to share that information again with councillors, just so to bring you sort of refresh. A lot of that's been driven at from a national and state perspective, where we've gone with traffic signals. So in the state of Queensland, obviously, most of that's governed. The standards and that are up through the state, through TMR. And in the city, in our city here, we've got in the order of, I think it's over 140, 150 odd sets of traffic lights now, of which we own half approximately and TMR own the other half. But we run our network, our traffic light network, on the same system. So, and the way the standards work is that as the state sort of looks at safety improvements, be it in this case talking about traffic lights and the way we manage traffic through them, we take those initiatives on board. Unfortunately, in Toowoomba alone, I'm aware of 2 fatalities alone in Toowoomba in the last 3 to 5 years of people turning right at traffic lights and getting hit and killed. And I suppose that's when we last discussed this with council. It's this challenge, isn't it, of balance of inconvenience that sometimes these things do bring to a driver, and how best to how best to manage those. It is, waiting another 20 or 30 seconds at a intersection, is that, it's that, is that okay, or, valued compared to, the risk level of somebody turning right and not actually reading the gap properly and getting hit. And that's probably the discussion that we've had a couple of times. But I'm happy to share some of that. Slow for Sam. Yes, a good initiative in Brisbane. We don't have actually Slow for Sam, but it's something we can take forward to have a further look at. But we do have at a number of locations in the city various slow down active lighting, particularly on there's a couple on West Street. As you come through the roundabout near Clifford Gardens, and as you go down that steep hill down onto Mort Street. So, but Slow for Sam tend to be more focused around schools and localities and places where kids and that are walking, or it might be around parks and different things like that, where there's more children potentially in the neighbourhood, so to speak.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Fucker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike. This is just a comment I want to make, just with the red lights and L drivers, Councillor Bill. I just think we need to, as a community, people just need to take a bit more responsibility for their own personal. I know I'm a parent of an L driver. I don't hop on my phone, and there may be some that do, but I try to pay as much attention as possible, and it scares the living daylights out of me half the time. But I just, and with the red lights, if someone misjudges, that's their calculation, and I don't know if we as a council are responsible for individual people, but I feel like we're responsible for making it safe, but without being a nanny state. I know that's just, I guess, an opinion. With the planning scheme, thank you, Councillor James. I did note on page 28 of this doc, number 5, it says support the design of new streets to develop lower speed environments. And I was wondering, obviously looking at probably reducing to 50 kilometres an hour, I believe that's insinuating. And will we be looking at moving to 50 sort of across our urban areas? Because I know that we're 60 in some areas and 50 in the others, and 40. And then on page 28 of board books, we look at, page 11, we talk about going down to 30 kilometres an hour. And I just wonder if it's confusing if we've got 50 and 60 and 30, and whether we would, obviously we're not going to move to, I would assume we're not going to move to 30 everywhere. It's just in areas of high traffic, like say Lindsay Street or areas like that. But does the business envisage us moving to a flat 50? Because I know there are some cities and urban areas who've all moved to 50, and there's some who are still at 60, and we're a bit of both. So, yeah, where do you see us going?
I think over time you'll generally see a reduction in speed limits across cities like Toowoomba. Basically, over the decades, obviously, we've got increased populations, increased density of populations, vehicles and people interaction. More people wanting to use that road corridor for different things. And so, it's our behaviours need to also potentially change over time and take into account that interaction of vehicles and people. We've taken a journey here at Council over the last decade and a half to see a slow reduction in certain areas. Obviously, the city, when I first came here, was a mix of 50 and 60 through the city here. We've taken that to 40 within the CBD, and looking at 30 potentially in streets like Russell Street, where we're trying to activate. There's a lot of value in activating a street from a pedestrian perspective, and so the more that you can bring in and make it safe for pedestrians using an area, generally speaking, the economic benefits to the local businesses have, there's a lot of research that sort of supports that sort of thing happening. In respect to our 50s and 60s streets, Queensland took the option back in the 90s of keeping a mix, whereas New South Wales, for instance, or as soon as you hit the urban area, in New South Wales, you go to 50 for all streets. To me, coming from down there, I thought that made a lot of sense and made it a lot easier from day one for a learner driver, or anybody else learning to just get used to driving from 50 kilometres an hour. And that's a generational thing as well, as I said. If you actually learn that the streets are slower and you drive, 50 becomes your norm. But for, I'll say, older drivers, a lot of our history goes back to when everything was 60. So we feel 50 and particularly 40 or 30 is very slow. So it's trying to get that right balance, trying to, as areas in a city, as you mentioned, Lindsay Street, Queen's Park area, looking at that, what opportunities are there to improve safety, road safety in those areas, reducing speed limits. There's also a lot of research that goes into actually when there is an accident, being hit by a car at 30 kilometres an hour or a car at 60, there's a huge difference in the chance of survival. So again, in our cities and our towns, a slow reduction ultimately benefits our whole community.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just the mixture of speeds everywhere is a bit confusing, and I'm not against moving to 50. It's just being consistent. I think we just need that consistency. Thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Good morning, Mike. Look, similar question actually, and I appreciate a lot of work's gone into this report, and I'll have absolutely no problem showing my support for it at the appropriate time. But I feel like we often set ourselves up, and of course, everyone wants to see no deaths, no fatalities, no road accidents, right? Of course, that's that's worth showing our support for. But and I think I said it to the consultant that was helping write this a year or so ago, that we set ourselves up with the ability to cotton wool or nanny state it to the extent we see fit. We've already talked about turning off the filtered traffic lights, Ruthven Street South down to 50 k's, even though that was a TMR decision. To which my question is that the core principle of this strategy is that human error is inevitable. It's going to happen, and it will continue to happen. And is there a difference in the amount of human error that will happen when we start making these changes? Sometimes, my opinion, perhaps unnecessarily. There's always going to be human error. You could slow it down to 20 k's an hour and it'd still be human error. So is that going to stop human error? And the second thing is there any, it's a hard one to say, data on when you're slowing down and you're stopping at filtered turns all day, that people get actually more angry and it creates more road issues? Has that been researched yet? So 2 points. Will it stop human error, and are drivers actually getting more angry?
Look, probably in regards to your second part of your questions, the behaviours of motorists, I think it's something from a research point of view. I don't have I'd have to come back to you on, probably to give you a better answer. Look, it is. I understand frustrations. We all tend as motorists to hop in our car and start the engine and drive, not necessarily thinking about what we're doing. We do it so automatically these days. What we're actually thinking about when we hop in the car, as you would have done this morning, that you've got a committee meeting to come to, I had to come to work. We've got all these thoughts and thinking in our minds. We get, as motorists, we get to, I was coming in past Downlands and the traffic's back to, right back to Griffith Street. And, so you start thinking about, as a motorist, as a human, as you say, human error is inevitable. You're not actually thinking so much about your driving. You're thinking about the environment that you're in, what you've got to do next. And this is the world that we tend to live in very much these days. And as you said, we tend to live in this hurried state. And so that causes us, when we have to stop for 20 seconds at a light to turn right, and nothing's coming the other way, it causes a level of frustration because we think automatically that, saving that 20 seconds will get us to where we want to go to that much quicker and faster and on to the next thing we want to do. It is very much about human behaviour, and that's what the Safe Systems approach to road safety is about. It's trying to pick up that as humans we are fallible, that we will make mistakes, that we're not actually fully attentive to the job of actually driving a motor vehicle when we're actually driving. And though we might think we're a good driver or an average driver or, even a poor driver sometimes, we all tend to sometimes do that wrong action out on the road and, should somebody pay with their life? If we can do something to prevent them, losing their life, where do we put that? And when we look at all the other services that we provide across council, we put, our community safety very high on that priority, and I know council does that with road safety as well. So it's ultimately trying to get that balance. But research on angry drivers, I don't have it hand. Sorry.
There's no more questions.
Very quick one, thanks, Chair. Really good conversation, Mike, and a lot of interest in this. See what we can do without over-regulating. I think that's the balance that we have with all of this. So I just wanted to be assured that this is covering all across our whole region. So obviously we've got a lot of rural roads and standards of surfaces we need to be mindful of obviously the traffic that's on those, making sure that they're safe for that, but not overcooking it. And I just want to be assured that our other policy around, you know, the road surfaces and what we have, the width of road and the isn't necessarily needing to be at a much greater standard, and therefore costs will be able to deliver less than what a community actually expects, and how this works with that document. Because they're two completely different things, I get that. One is around road safety, the other is around the quality of surface and what have you, but they work together. So from a community perspective, you know, there's a risk sometimes of a lower surface or width of a road. There is a risk that's carried if you don't reach an international standard. I'm just wanting to be assured that we'll be delivering even less road as a result of hitting an international standard.
Thank you for that question. Probably a good part of this document focuses in on engineering treatments. There's one of those action areas. But from a council's, the way we implement that in reality, I suppose, is yes, you do have your current day standards, but there's actually a mix of current day standards that can be attributed to the level of road that you're managing. So we use things such as extended design domain and other things like that, which allows you to, when we're looking at new roads, and particularly in rural areas, crests and curves and all sorts of things can be given a higher level of from a risk assessment point of view, you can push the envelope a little bit further and different things like that. So there's a lot of that goes in there. We also have things like through the IPWA, our institutions and stuff like that, Institute of Public Works Engineers Australia, documents such as lower order road design guidelines and things like that, which again very much speak to, you know, whether you know, single lane roads, 2-lane roads and that, depending on the traffic volumes and that. It also sort of talks to the surfacing that you might look at. You know, this is just a general rule of thumb, sort of, you know, once you're getting to 100, 150 vehicles a day, that's when you might look at sealing something. More so from, you know, the balance between the cost of maintaining that section of road and different things like that. So I think the critical thing from a council point of view is our maintenance and renewals and trying to continue to keeping that road surface, you know, what is a safe road, that question earlier, trying to keep that road as safe as reasonably possible from a user's perspective, as the surface, trying to mitigate things such as the chances of aquaplaning, you know, big potholes, all these sorts of things, rutting and stuff like that. So trying to, you know, focus in on what keeps the network going. I assure you that there's very little room for any ability to do any sort of what anyone might call gold plating. You know, that our financial sustainability and everything like that drives a need across all areas, but particularly even a network to achieve goal cost effective possibly can.
There's no more questions. I'd like someone to first the motion that Council adopt the Toowoomba Regional Road Safety Strategy 2024-2028 as presented in Attachment 1. Trevor first, seconder, James. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you.
I forgot to thank Dr. Mandela, who was our consultant that we've used right through the development of this over the last probably best part of 2 years. He's put a lot of work in there, obviously to Rod and the team in the Transport and Drainage Planning team for the work that they've also put behind this. So thank you.
Conclusion of meeting. Councillors click to leave the meeting. Thank you.